Alrighty.
Yeah, welcome to the podcast
Welcome.
where we do podcast things.
I'm in a podcast.
Um,
As you do.
I'm doing it. I'm in a podcast, Mom.
Whoa, who is that? Who
Your
is that
mom must-
voice? Who are you?
Special guest for a third week in a row.
Whoa, that's
this
crazy.
isn't our gimmick for our second season. That's crazy.
Whoa. Do I introduce myself
Why don't
now?
you introduce yourself? Yeah.
Hi, I am Alex Kaplan. I am a friend of Malachi's and a soon-to-be friend of Ryan's. Hey, Ryan, what's up? I've been
Hi.
listening to music. Actually, if I'm being real, I've been a music nerd since freshman year of high school when I really started getting into music. Otherwise, I was just listening to what my parents played, like most kids. Yeah. For the most part, that was 70s, 80s rock, and a lot of 90s hip-hop from both of my parents, weirdly enough.
I respect it.
Yeah.
I respect it.
Yeah.
This man's put me on a lot of rap, not gonna lie, back in high school.
Yeah. Shout out to the lunch table where all we do for an entire lunch period was talk about music and then badly freestyle.
Yeah, that was a time.
That was a time.
Yeah, that reminds me of back in my days with a future guest we're gonna have on the show. But he had this ratchet van that he called the Trap Van.
Oh no.
And it'd be me, him, and then a few other dudes, and he would just play the most trap beats you've ever heard, and we would freestyle over it.
Oh, we didn't even use beats.
No.
We were just bad.
Arguably, we did something dumber, which is generate random words and then try to incorporate them into the freestyles.
Yeah. What a time to be
Everyone
alive.
gangster till somebody says purple.
Orange.
I'm still really proud of my really dumb representative bar.
Yes, sir.
Can we hear the
Oh,
representative
100%. I sat on it for a good 30 seconds. Was like, got it, nailed. 100%. It was representative. I rep representative. Call me the representative of my city. Representative. Bars.
bar? Legendary.
Oh man.
This is gonna be a great episode. I'm so hyped for this.
All right. Alex,
Yes.
what are we listening to today?
I'm so glad you asked. One of my favorite albums of all time, Avantdale Bowling Club, it's a self-titled project by the band artist, not too sure on it, Avantdale Bowling Club, which is comprised of Tom Scott, a New Zealand rapper, and his backup jazz band, which I actually don't have the details on, and I am kind of ashamed of myself, but I really enjoyed it. I love myself some jazz and some rap, so together it was match made in heaven.
So what is the context of you getting into this album? Like, how does Alex find Avantdale Bowling Club?
I'm gonna be honest, I've been thinking about that for the last, week and a half, and I just can't remember how I discovered it. I want to say it was, late night scrounging around on the internet, maybe even YouTube, but, no matter how I try to attack it, I can't remember how I found it. But I know the moment I found it, it was like, oh, I'm going to keep this one around in my library for a while. So for now, we're just going to say YouTube, probably.
That's sick.
You know, there's something to be said for that kind of music discovery. Now, I will preface to the listeners, most of the music that we have had on the show so far has been relatively clean. This album is not that.
Oh.
So we're going to be discussing some topics of drugs, poverty, all that good jazz, and also there's a lot of swearing on the album. So
Yeah.
if you're going to go listen to it yourself be warned.
Yes,
But with that out of the way,
it does say E next to the songs, so I mean,
Yeah.
yeah. If you didn't know,
link
from
of the
that-
day.
Oh,
Link-
link of the day.
Link of the day? Are we just going to
Tell
discuss?
them without telling them.
Okay. It is from one of my favorite content creators online, especially in the music space, Mike the Snare. His 20
Love that guy.
his 2020 albums and music review. It's just a very short 5-minute video where he just goes through a bunch of different categories that he made up, and it's really funny, but also has some fantastic picks.
Yeah,
Nice.
it kind of reminds me of like the superlatives at the end of like your school yearbook, where it's just like something like most likely to end up at a Denny's at 1 a.m.
Yep.
Like the most random categories. Like I think the one that killed me was the Radiohead
Yes.
one where it was like Idiotask or something. Like that killed me. But
Oh, it's that
yeah,
guy.
no.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know Mike the Snare.
The
Yeah, no, Mike the Snare is dope. I freaking love his content. He's the reason that there are certain artists that I wouldn't have checked out if not for him. His Deep Discog Jive is
100%.
phenomenal.
100%.
Although I hate his Weezer takes, but we can get into that at another time.
Oh boy. That Weezer video just came out too. I enjoyed that video. It was interesting. But
I enjoyed the video, but his takes are awful.
oh boy. But
A hot take.
So
I agree. Like his deep discog dives are fantastic. I highly recommend, especially now, the one on MF Doom. That one was just, especially considering the figure that MF Doom is and how he's just so spread out through his different monikers. It was like,
Right.
oh, this is how this connects to this. Blah 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 blah. It was fascinating.
is MF Doom on this album?
No.
Just had to make sure.
All right.
No.
All right, cool. But yeah, that's our link of the day. But yeah, so first impressions of the album. So I am a person who doesn't tend to like albums on first listen, and this is an album that was an exception for me.
Ooh.
This one really grabbed my attention from the jump. I really enjoyed the way that it kind of had a great sense of motion, sense of momentum. The dude has some of the best lyricism I've heard. It's just like everything about this album is things that I like about jazz and rap, and it kind of mitigates the things that I don't like about jazz and rap, which is a really interesting thing, and that's what makes me really enjoy it.
Yeah, for me, I am very much a jazz rap listener. I'm a jazz listener and a rap listener, but like when it's combined, it's some of my favorite albums of all time. You know, I think of No Name's Telephone or like some
Solid.
old Tribe Called Quest stuff. Like that's my arena of like maybe middle school, maybe high school. That was like what I listened to a lot. So for this, the first few seconds of the first, like the jazz itself, even without the rap is just phenomenal, but the jazz itself is so good. Like it's so good.
Oh yeah.
So good, bro. I mean, for me, I at first when I listened to it, I hadn't fully like grasped everything until like a few re-listens, because I similarly am not the type to like enjoy and click with something on a first listen, but like every time I re-listen to it, I just enjoy it more and more. And again, just the way it starts, it was just immediately like, oh, this is a jazz album and a rap album. I hear that saxophone, I know where this is going, and the fact that it's a live jazz band just adds to it. It's just so good.
Sure. So good.
Yeah, that's something that I really freaking love about this. Like, I really like the live element to it. And again, that contributes so much to the momentum of the album and the momentum of each individual track, because you can't get those kind of builds from samples.
100%.
You can't get these kind of huge swells and these tempo changes and like everything that's going on. You can't get that from a sample. And that's one of the things that really excited me about this album on first listen. And I think we can just jump straight into the first track from here.
Yeah.
Years Gone By has some of the best builds I've heard on anything in a while. And I love the way that it opens with just this saxophone that's absolutely screaming.
100%.
And it's like one of those things where it's like, yeah, it's not like on a sort of a technical level, these are a bunch of things you're not supposed to do when you're playing saxophone.
Mm-hmm.
But it's so cool in this context. And it's just like, it gives you this sort of like, I don't know, like the deepest cry of the soul kind of vibes.
Some Coltrane
And-
vibes.
100%.
And then it just from there, you just kind of get these really steady lyrics, like where it's just kind of keeping on a steady rhythmic pattern, a steady rhyme scheme, like all the way through. And then everything around it gets to just be super chaotic because the lyrics are holding everything together. Also, shout outs to the chords for feeling very
Oh
like
my gosh,
Vince
bro.
Guardelli trio-esque.
Please.
I was getting mad Charlie Brown Christmas vibes
Oh, the
here.
chords. Like there's so many times I geek out over chords in this whole album. Um
Uh, for me, and I'm about to name drop a big one. The moment that saxophone struck in the opening, I was back into Pimp a Butterfly, and I know like drawing comparisons to Pimp a Butterfly by Kendrick Lamar is like the biggest and wildest amount of praise, but like it just took me right back there, especially with the song For Free matching up with Years Gone By and how
right.
like
Oh,
the
100%.
cadence of his flow and the way the jazz is layered in the background, and then also just the lyricism of Years Gone By is just insane to me, where he's like, oh, here's my whole life story just real quick before we get into the rest of the album. Here it is.
Yeah, every single year
Yeah.
too. And I like how he incorporates his influences and nostalgia in there. Like he has some Tupac nods, some Snoop Dogg. He mentions Mario with an amazing bar that I'll mention
Yeah,
later.
yeah.
And Zelda, Dr. Dre. Like there's just so many nods to stuff that happened in that same year that like you have to listen back to like, oh wow, he was talking about that. It's so beautifully done.
Ano-
Yeah. And I think even with the lyrics, something that really compels me is it never feels like he's just throwing in a line just to make a rhyme happen. Like every single word feels super intentional, where it's like sometimes with rapping I'll listen to it, I'm just like, okay, they're just making a dumb simile here so that they can make a rhyme that sounds good.
Right.
But I never really feel that way on this album, and that's another thing that I really like about this whole album. But yeah, like even with like the name drops or like the references to everything, none of them really feel out of place on this track.
Yeah. And another thing about the way he's kind of tying in lines, and the reason why I think it's better with following listens, like every subsequent listen, it grows more. In this opening track, he basically tells you the different themes of every single, like, subsequent song. Like, he brings up how he doesn't have money. He talks about his friend who hangs himself in the park, which, again,
Right.
adult content, sorry. But like he talks about his child, he talks about returning home. He talks about everything that is gonna be a major topic of discussion on this album. And I that's the reason why I always love this opening, because it's like, oh wow, he really just like snuck in like these little mentions, and then when you listen to it later, you're like, oh, he mentioned this later. Oh, okay.
Yeah, it reminds me of when I was watching JoJo's for the first time with one of my friends, and they kept pointing to things in the opening and saying that's a spoiler.
Yep. Yep.
And I
I
didn't
hate
understand
that.
what that meant. But they were just like, that's a spoiler, and I was just like, what the frick are you talking about? But then they'd just be like, okay, this part right there, that was in the opener. And I was like,
That's
oh.
a
So that
surprisingly
when you were
good
talking
analogy. Oh my god.
Yeah,
Bro.
never thought I'd be making a JoJo's reference on this podcast. This podcast is now officially a JoJo's
Oh
reference.
no.
It works though. It works though. I have like a bar check and a flow check for every single song. So my bar check for this song is 1990. I was a plumber with a pipe dream, side of screen, hunting for mushies that were lime green at light speed. So let me break this down, guys. I was a plumber with a pipe dream. So a pipe dream is like an unachievable dream, like something that seems like unattainable side of screen, but he also parallels Mario and says, I was a plumber with a pipe dream, side of screen, hunting for mushies. So he's referencing his drug addiction in the future, but then mushrooms in Mario that were lime green, light speed. I was like, this is so hard, bro.
It goes crazy. The wordplay is insane. And I have my own like picks for lyrical gems, but like I feel like listening to this song, you just gotta go through it, like just bullet point by bullet point.
For
I'll mention
real.
some of my other ones later because I have some other favorites, but like this one, every single year is just such a great like, oh, here's my reference for this year, and here's how it relates to my life. I know we already talked about that, but it's just, it still blows my mind on subsequent listens. Just like, wow.
But
Yeah, for sure. It is super cool stuff. And then going from this track into Pocket Lint, I think Pocket Lint
Ooh.
is the certified thick groove of the album.
100%.
I don't feel like there's much other tracks that you could throw in there because this whole album grooves, but this one just smacks. Like It's just like
So good.
it has some of the best builds. Like I really like the way that the chorus is sort of like the hook is sort of like this Thundercat-esque kind of hook.
Yeah.
Like it feels like something you could very easily find on a Thundercat album, and it's very cool. And I really like a lot of the lyrics. I like the rhythms that he uses. I really like sort of towards, I think it's right before the last chorus, there's this crazy piano lick behind this, like, because he like does this like, and it's just like totally fits in, and I'm just like, yo, he just did this like crazy rhythmic thing in his flow, and then you just get this piano run behind it just out of nowhere, and I'm just like,
it's ridiculous.
Bro, that was nuts.
Yeah. For me, I'd say this song, was probably the best instrumentally. Just the jazziest of the jazziest. The saxophone is going wild. There are like a number of small sound effects in the background, and just effects in general, production wise. They're just adding so much depth to the way it sounds, and like especially with Tom Scott's performance here, it's wild because he takes a relatively common topic in rap and then just elevates it with his lyricism. My favorite line, this is one of my lyrical gems for the album.
Bar check.
Low down, broke, no cash, no hope, skint, no mad, no plan B, no stash, only got the crumbs sitting in my mustache. Just the way he flows on that, and then just the lyricism and like the way he says it, it just gets me hype every time.
For real, bro.
Yeah, when you started singing, I was like, oh yeah, that part was really good.
Bro, in the choir in the back, like,
for real,
the layering, it just makes it so full, and they're like, yo, this is so cool. Something I want to mention, there's two flow things I want to mention. So something I noticed in this album a lot is this switch to the triplet. So like where he goes, government wanna get there, and then he's like in the fours and then switches to that. It gives me like this Suicide Boys-esque switch. And then also the massive flow check. This is like my favorite flow switch in the whole album. The milk, the bread, the bills, the bed, the fruit, the veg, the morning break, the battery dead, and arm in a... when he did that, I wanted to scream. And it made so much sense. It wasn't just words inside the flow. It was like actual stuff you have to pay for, like stuff that you couldn't afford. Like I was like, yo, this is a grocery list. But I had to, it was crazy.
The other thing for his performance I want to point out is he's messing around with his inflections a lot too, which this comes
Very
up
Kendrick
later.
Style.
Yeah,
Very
100%. This comes up later that, again, I'll mention it later because there's some specific uses that I want to bring up. But, like, you notice he'll like, switch the ways in which he says it. He'll go up here a little bit and then drop it back down. And it just, like, it again, adds so much depth to the way he's performing and to the song where you can, like, oh, wow, this really, like, added to it in a way that only is possible with how he did it.
Yeah, and I love 100%. That outro too. The little bluesy masterpiece at the end though.
Yeah.
Is that the one with the one day?
Yeah, yep.
Yeah, that was really cool.
The outros on this album are so cool.
100%.
I am a sucker for a good snack. Malachi knows what I'm talking about.
A good snack, bro.
I was about to say... continue.
That's a reference to an earlier podcast episode that hasn't been released yet when we've ruined recording it. So you'll understand when you listen to the first episode of this season.
Gotcha.
But I am a sucker for a good interlude, and I really like the detail that they just kind of threw them onto the end of the tracks and they didn't like separate them out in Spotify.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like I like both ways. Like I like it when they give them their own name. Like interludes are cool if they have a name. But if they don't have a name, just throw them onto the end of the track like they did on this.
Yeah.
And I like the way that the interludes tie into the themes of the track. Like, there's other ones down the line where it feels like it kind of ties in very well that I want to mention. But I really like
I know exactly which one you're talking about. Because I was about to say, there are some also that just set up everything for the following song so perfectly. Like the outro game on this album is just so good. It's just really good. The way it either recaps the song or sets up the next one.
Right, it makes it feel more like a full experience, like you're seeing a show of sorts. Like he raps, and then it's like they just have this nice outro, and then it goes into the next one. It's like a jazz concert, kind of.
100%.
So you're just kind of chilling. So yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And then Friends now. Or
yes.
Fiends,
Yep.
if you take out the parentheses.
Yup,
bro.
This one I think was the one that hit me the hardest on the first listen through of the album.
Yeah.
There are other ones that ring a little bit closer to home for me personally, but this one is definitely the one that's just like the most in your face about, yeah, this is the hardship that I dealt with growing up.
100%.
And like this is something that I see, and in this track he kind of talks about his drug addiction, the way that he sees it affect everyone's lives around him,
right?
And just kind of the way that it like kind of destroyed his family, destroyed his friends' lives, just everything. And it's just like on the first time I listened through it, I was just like, oh, is this just a song about his friend killing himself? But then like on more listens through, I'm like, oh wait, no, he's talking about so many different people here, and the way that everything kind of ties together. And then the line where he says, like, I can't fault you for it, but I'm the one who got you hooked on it, I think is what he says.
Yeah, the end of like
that just killed me. I was just like, yo.
It's from a written standpoint and a lyricism standpoint, I think this might be the highlight for the album. And it's immediately apparent, as you pointed out, from the title, like the way he weaves both themes of his drugs and his friends into it by just throwing a parenthesis around the R. And it's like, oh wow, like immediately I was like, okay, so this is what we're gonna be going with. And there are so many like just heart-wrenching lines, like the final line where he's like, where you tied that noose up and how it like connects to the previous lines. That one was just guttural. And then you also get a great sense of friendship that he has with some of these people in his life, like the way he's in the, what does he say in the chorus? He's like, I ain't even gotta, or he's talking about how he doesn't even need,
be on the stuff when you say this stuff, bro, or something.
Yeah, he doesn't even need to name drop people, and they know who he's talking about.
And I even like the sort of the line that he draws between people who he knew outside of sort of the drug usage like circle and people who he knew because of it. I really like that line that he draws, especially using the outro, where it's like he talks about the friend that he got hooked on drugs, and how he's like, dang, like I really did you dirty here. But then in the outro, it's like my friends don't stick around anymore because like I ain't partying or whatever, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that sort of distinction of like, yeah, like there's all these people who, while I was using my drugs, I thought were my friends, but there's this kind of clear distinction because of my friends because of drugs, and my friends like that I kind of corrupted by this, you know? And it's just sort of, I don't know. I really like that, the way that he just kind of draws a clear line with that. And I think it's like really heart-wrenching as well, because he's like, oh, like these are people whose lives I affected in a negative way. It's so gut-wrenching, man. Like this is the hardest hitting track on the album.
Yeah,
that's a good point too about his friends changing when he stopped using. He even mentions like how, what was it? I remember when we used to do drugs. Now it feels like they
do us.
Bro,
yeah.
Bro, speaking of that, the way he changes his voice on that verse is like he just finished doing drugs. Like, I noticed that. That was a really good touch. And he also does it in the live version. That's how I know it was like an intentional choice. But like, yeah, it just sounds like his voice is worn out. So that was a really good touch. But yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to do a quick bar check.
Oh, Barcheck.
Barcheck.
Barcheck. One of my favorite things in rap especially is when they use the same word or phrase phonetically multiple times in the same line to mean different things. You already know which one I'm talking about. My example of this is Denzel Curry's Taboo, the title track.
Oh,
Innocence. I sensed that all her innocence had died. He does a great one, which just ties back into the themes of doped out on the dope, looking all dopey, which is just like such a clean bar right there, just like slice right through the middle. Great wordplay.
Yeah, that's super clean. Like, and it's like super concise as well. Like, he doesn't have to draw it out a super long time to get to the point of it.
Yeah,
it's just super clean and right there. I really like that. Yeah.
Oh! I have to mention this. That one part when he said, "I remember when I used to," the orchestration, bro. This James Bond, Pink Panther, Sherlock Holmes flute masterpiece. Like, I had to learn how to play it because it was I remember when I used to, bro. Yo, when I tell you, like, that part is so majestic. It's like this F minor 7 or something, but it's just so beautiful with the flute and the swelling strings and the bass. It was so nice. I just had to mention that because it was just so cool.
Yeah, and as Ryan brought up earlier with the outro bit for the song, I think it is top 2. I know that's not very much out of eight tracks, but top 2 outros on the song or on the album, and it's specifically just how it ties back into the song with my friends, they don't want to hang around me anymore.
Right.
Like the sadness, and it's like it just perfectly recaptures the feeling that you get throughout, and then adds to it with just like this afterthought almost that is like, oh man, wow, I really messed up, huh?
Right. And the way it's sung is like this lament, like this soulful. I don't know who's singing on some of these outros, but he's really good.
Yeah.
But yeah, that outro was really good too. That guitar breakdown, that Wes Montgomery, that's a jazz guitarist. But like, I'm telling you, I'm geeking out jazz wise and rap wise on this album. But yeah, that outro was good.
Yes, very good stuff. And then the Water medley. This is one that I had kind of glossed over in my brain as I was just kind of listening to this album, because I just kind of listened through the album without really looking at the tracks multiple times in a row, like when I first listened to it. But then I was just like, oh wait, this is actually like 3 different distinct sections.
Yeah,
right.
And I think that's part of why I didn't remember what it was. But it's a really clever idea of like tying in different like water
related,
kind of referencing metaphors or analogies or whatever.
Yeah.
And I really, really like the way that he kind of sort of builds, like where he has this like really chill opening, and then when he brings in that thundering bass, but like he doesn't bring it to the front right away until everything drops out and it's just that boom, boom, boom.
Yeah, boom, that like EDM-y pulse in the first part. With a riser, and then and then the hook comes in. That was so cool. Triumphant.
Yeah.
I find it like super interesting, kind of what Ryan was saying, and with the different conceptual ways of looking at and like metaphorically using water to stand in for a bunch of things. Like I had to English 101 poetry analysis some of this, and like go back and look up the lyrics and like, oh, okay. Oh, so this is, I got that. Like verse 1, probably in my opinion the most interesting like water metaphor is like the commodification of water, and how like when water runs out, the rich will profit because like they'll have all the control, and like they'll regulate his rainwater that he's trying to use so that he can live a cheaper life, which also like ties back into the ideas of pocket lint. Like he doesn't have too much money, so he's trying to use all the resources available to him, and he's trying to use this rainwater so he could grow this garden, so he has his own food that he doesn't have to buy. And it's like just really interesting how he ties in the idea of water there in that first verse.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's beautifully
I really
done.
like
I
the
think my
line.
favorite hook. Well, my favorite hook is on the second part, the "Stay hydrated on a
Yep.
vibration." That's my favorite hook. My favorite, like bars wise and like whoa
Yeah.
one is the third part.
100%. I
The
100% agree.
ego go free, or what was it? Ego go free or something. But what was the second one? Yeah, there was a bar he said on the second one that I related heavily with. It was the introverted, extroverted, hermit, underrated, underserving, perfectly imperfect, down to earth, earthling, personable person in person. So like this
Yeah,
one
that's one of my
like
favorite parts on
touched me
the whole
so much
thing.
because like it's like this idea of trying to label someone as introvert or extrovert, but like he also says he's personable in person, and it's just really hard to because of how nuanced people are. And he comments a lot about like his struggles with I think later on it was in a later track he talks about his writing process. And no, it was on this one. Yeah, how he
Yeah.
feels, and it was on the third part. Yeah, that third part was just it was hitting me hard. Like I was relating to it. But yeah, it was just I really related to that. Just feeling like reserved, but then also having a lot to offer, and like really battling between purposefully doing things. Especially, bro, that third part hit me so
Yeah.
hard with
I'll
his.
I'll talk to the third
Yeah,
part in a sec.
yeah. Go
Yeah,
ahead. Go ahead.
I really liked the idea of how this kind of carried on from Friends, where he talks about the idea of leaving your vices behind to grow up and
Mm-hmm.
be a grown up.
Right.
And like in Friends, he kind of talks about like I can't get high anymore because I'm too
I grew
old.
too
Like
much.
I'm not
Yeah.
able to.
Yeah.
But in this one, it's more like I can't afford to anymore. Like
It's not viable.
it's not beneficial to. It's not a viable option. No, and I think that kind of change in perspective is really cool. And you'll see this perspective continue to be developed in like later tracks. And I really like the way that he kind of weaves this whole kind of narrative of like, okay, like this was my path through dealing with drug addiction and dealing with that culture and all of these different things, and how he kind of the way that he kind of dealt with it, and how he like you can almost like trace the 5 stages of grief or whatever through it,
Oh wow.
and
I
or
didn't even
whatever,
think of
because
that.
like you can kind of get yeah, it's just like crazy because like I don't know, like I like this track.
Yeah.
I also really like the line, this is going back to something you were saying earlier, but I really like you don't know what the well is worth until it runs dry,
Yep.
or whatever he says.
Yes.
Like
Yes.
it's such a cliche kind of thing. Like it's like there's a whole Joni Mitchell song about it. Like all in all, you don't know what you got till it's gone. You pave paradise and put up a parking lot, whatever.
Don't
But
it all seem to go that one?
yeah,
You
that
don't.
one. Yeah, that joint slaps. But it's kind of like a different idea where it's like, yeah, like you don't think about water in your day-to-day life. Like you don't think about it, but then like if you don't have water, you're just like, wait, this stuff's actually really valuable.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Right.
Oh, so just the idea of verse 2, by the way, and how it relates to verse 3. And then, by the way, verse 3, I'm ranking it as the third best verse on this whole album, just because
So
some of the
good.
lines are amazing,
Just
some of them are
hits.
just perfect setup or release for other ones. It's just like, and it's just such a long verse. It goes for like a good like 2 minutes. It's crazy. But yeah, verse 2 kind of being about like staying hydrated, quote unquote, which is really just his stand-in for like, oh, being an alcoholic.
Hi.
And then verse 3 feels,
Hydrated.
yeah. And then verse 3 feels like he's waking up with a hangover and he's kind of just like, what have I done? Like
Wow.
he's going on this walk like, oh my god. And just it's super contemplative and dark at times, like talk about how he feels death closing in on him. And I just love the way he like paints some of these pictures. Here again, because bar checks. There's so many bar checks throughout this album.
There's so many bar checks on just this song.
Yeah, yeah, for real. Verse 3, write it down, rip it up, think about giving up, flip it up, and realize I didn't make it for making a living off. I'm sitting up in the middle of the night, considering whether I did enough. And just like his description of the creative process, it's just brutal there. And he's just like, it hits home to a real, like, very real degree, and it hurts.
It does. And like the way he artistically portrays it with the background vocals, it gives me, not to mention Kendrick again, but like how Kendrick uses his voice to portray different characters. And I think for this part, he uses that like rip it up as like his inner voice, or like kind of that inner dialogue. So I really liked how he did that.
Just one thing I forgot about is when I mentioned inflections earlier, verse 2, when he's talking about quote unquote getting hydrated again, like he uses those inflections throughout that second verse, and to me at least, it feels like he's trying to portray like how drunk he is. Like he's going wild with these inflections, making his voice squeaky and whatever, and it's like, oh, so he's drinking a lot. Like he is drinking a lot. Also, one last bar check, because I forgot this one as well. Verse 3 again, probably one of my favorite, that's a lie, my favorite bar on the whole album is way later on, but used to want to try to make it large till I saw my baby take a bath. Or as he would say, bath. Yeah. Again, using those inflections to make those like those lines work. It sets up Quincy's March, which is a song we'll talk about later, so well, and it's also just so nice. The following line being, now the goal is just to make him laugh, or laugh. Now the dream is just to make it last, or lost. It's just so good with like bringing back in
being
that
an American.
Yeah, bringing back in that water theme too. Just like, oh, okay.
Oh shoot.
Another like
that's crazy.
Last thing. Another like word painting type thing that I felt with this whole track. Not word painting, but like this is probably the least live one. It has the most digital instruments with like synthy and stuff like that. So I found that interesting when portraying the themes of like, you know, using faker, like, what am I trying to say? Like portraying, you know what I'm trying, like reality,
like synthetic, like,
well, this is
synthetic.
This is also the most introspective track on the album.
Oh, for sure.
Like everything else is him talking about his environment and the people around him. Like everything up to here, like Years Gone By is literally just him looking back at the circumstances that led him to where he was. Pocket Lint is, oh, I'm broke. I'm affected by X, Y, or Z thing. Friends is about, these are what my friends are doing and this is how this affected me and how I affected them. And then you get to this one and it's literally just him getting drunk and then reflecting on it.
Yep.
No one else is mentioned except for perhaps like his son and the government, or like the elites rather. Like no one else is mentioned in the entirety of this like 9-minute track. And I think the synthetic element goes into that idea of like, you could very easily imagine him just like sitting in his room on his MacBook, just making this track by himself, not talking to anyone, you know, like with everything else, like, it's like, yeah, it's got live musicians, so he's got to be communicating with people, but this one is very clearly a track for him in this midst. Like, this album is a mass exodus album where he's just like screaming out his soul to the sky, but like this track especially is that way, and I think that that's really, really cool.
For sure.
Phew.
Old Dogs.
Oh boy.
Old Dogs.
Old Dogs is really interesting to me because over the course of this album, it is probably the most positive song on the album, but it still has like that underlying existentiality, especially with the chorus that kind of like hints at like they're kind of just waiting around to die. But like throughout the verses though, it's very like, it's one of the most positive joints on this whole thing.
Yeah, with a bunch of just basketball metaphors
So
and just
good.
like, and I've read something about like an interview he had. He said for this one, he wanted to exemplify the feeling like when he's playing basketball, he feels like he has the least problems, like he feels the most in control of his life, which
Mm.
was like, dang, he said that in an interview, what in the world? But yeah, he said even it's really hard for him to say like I had this moment under control because he never feels like he's in control of his situation, but in basketball, that's a thing. So that's interesting, his commentary on that, and even kind of the dichotomy between like, oh, this is a happy song, but underlying is
Yeah.
like this feeling of I'm kind of waiting to die and I don't feel like I'm in control even in my happy moments. So
Yeah.
it's very interesting.
I
Another
think that kind of gives it
again,
like an even more depressed.
oh, another like thing for lyricism that just like shows how amazing
Bartek?
he is. This one isn't necessarily a bar check, but he just has such a grasp over some of these tongue twisting lines. Like he uses a lot, and I do mean a lot of assonance, consonants, and alliteration, and internal rhyme too, throughout this song. Like, it is slightly a bar check line, but like backboard of
Bartek.
boredom. From half court, it's pouring shots falling like autumn, and then up in the post, chilling with those close enough to know my nose hairs. I can't
Nose
even get
hairs,
through it.
yeah.
But like he's just like effortlessly, which again kind of reflects how he feels like he's in control, just weaving his way through these really complex, like dynamic lines.
Wait a minute, is this yo, this one has my favorite outro on the whole album.
For real?
The last night I slept in the open. Bro, I don't know why, but I've been singing that all week. It's just
That's
it's
fair.
so good. It's so good, bro. I don't know why.
Also,
It's
some of these like deep cut, like basketball references are just so fun to like look back on. Like he name dropped so many people that I almost missed it, and like I had to look
right.
up the lyrics again to like analyze this one. I didn't realize that when he mentions horse, he's talking about like the basketball game. Yeah. I at first I was like,
Yes, horse.
I was like horse. Okay, yeah.
And
But then I had to go
Barcheck,
back.
yo.
It was horse, like the basketball
Like
game.
it was horse. I'm calling it before I even saw it.
Yeah.
Because in horse, you
I
have to,
haven't
like,
even thought about horse
bro.
in years.
For real.
For real, yeah.
Like I'm just like I remember playing horse with my friends back in like elementary school. And like
Yeah.
I haven't thought about it in years, dang.
Yeah.
Honestly, and wait, isn't horse not just for basketball, but it could be for like anything, like, oh, copy what I do
Yeah, I think so.
and see if you could do it. Yeah.
Yeah, but most commonly I've seen it associated with basketball.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, no, this
Horse.
is a fire track. I think at this point in my taking notes, like I was like just kind of rushing through it because I was like I want to make sure I'm to recording on time. And this was kind of the track that sort of fell by the wayside for me
Yeah.
as far as my notes went. But I was also just really excited for the next track, Home.
Oh, home, yes.
Holy.
This is probably my favorite track on the whole album.
I
for
hard
many
agree.
reasons.
I hard agree. I think this is the best song on the album.
And so for me, this one kind of hits in a very, very different way because about a year ago or so, actually, no, this was probably about 6 months ago, actually. My parents came up to visit me because my parents live in Virginia. I live in Maryland. And I was like, hey, you wanna just go run around where our old house was, go see the businesses and stuff and see what's poppin'? And I couldn't shake the feeling of how dead the town I grew up was.
Yeah.
And it was like we couldn't find people available to hang out with that I knew. I reached out to one dude, he had moved out, and we went and got lunch. I saw very few people that I knew, and I was just like, dang, like I have gotten to the point where I can't go home again. And like, sure, this was like sort of coming out of COVID, and like businesses were trying to get back up on their feet, and it wasn't exactly like everyone was doing so hot. Like one place I stopped in, they were having a hard time finding people to work. So, like, it's not like I was catching Damascus at the, like, freaking height of its existence, but it was really that moment that it cemented me. I don't know where home is.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't know. Like, the apartment I'm living in now, it's nice. The dudes I'm living with, they're chill. But I don't feel home here. I go down to my parents' house in Virginia. I never lived there. It feels very strange. I love my parents, but that's not really home. And it was at that point where I realized, dang, I don't know where home is. And then listening to this track and him talking about the strangers that I used to love,
Yeah.
and the idea of him having outgrown everything that was going on living around home, and like all of that stuff, and like even the allusions to like driving to the laundromat or like riding on the bus, and how
Right.
everything felt so far away, but then now that he's grown up, he's like, dang, the world is a whole lot bigger than I thought. And just all of this together just kind of hit me right in the place of, yeah, you're a grown up now. You can't go home again. Like, you're this track is gonna tell you that you can't go home again. Then I got all sad. Um,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
but
it's
I love this track for that reason, because it so aptly put into words that feeling of going home for the first time after you haven't been in a long time,
right.
and the feeling that it's not the same place.
Yeah, it's a very sobering thought when you come off the high of nostalgia,
Oh yeah.
because
Oh, for sure.
when you go back, because everyone knows nostalgia's a liar, but no one wants to believe it. Like, they're just like, dang, that was just the best time of my life. That show was so good. Like, that song was so good. But when you actually go back and you see how it's changed, I had a similar experience going back to my old neighborhood in Brooklyn. It's gentrified like crazy. Like, oh my gosh, all the local businesses are gone, high rises, crazy. But yeah, that was my experience. And even with this track, he talks about like how he goes into so much, like
Yeah.
how the ancient Maori people, like how his New Zealand home was built off of the misery of the ancient people. It's so much,
Yeah.
but it all builds to the same theme of his home isn't the same as he thought it was.
For sure. And
Yeah.
for me listening to this one, similar to you guys, like when I moved away, probably like 8th grade from my original house to a new one, it was like just this song brought me right back to then. Whereas like, oh, I just moved away from all my friends and now I gotta make some new ones. All right, let's figure that out. And just the way the song just all right, let me calm down. I'm just getting back into it. The instrumental immediately is super distinct from the rest of the album, except for maybe Water Medley, in that it's so much quieter and so much more restrained. It doesn't have screaming saxophones. It's just like a very quiet backing, so you could focus on his lyricism and how he's kind of like bringing up all these different ideas. And to go into his lyricism, there's a very subtle thing that he does, and I think it contributes a lot, which is he goes in a reverse chronological order. He starts out with how he imagines when he comes back home. Like, he starts out with the future, and he's like, oh, I'm going to do this. It's going to be great. I'm going to meet up with all these people. Then he comes to the present, in which he's in, like, that apartment, and he's like, oh, okay, my plant's dead. Nothing's really exciting. Everything's kind of gray and gross and boring. And then that third verse, which this is my favorite verse on the album. It is, I honestly think it's one of the top 10 verses of the 2010s, at least in the rap category, because it just hits hard. And it's because he's looking back on what he remembers his home to be. And then you get lines like, like you mentioned, Ryan, and the truth is that I don't know where my home is anymore, or like hometown or ghost town, don't know how to tell the difference anymore. And the one that hits me the hardest, because it's just brutal, which is suicide rates higher than the rent.
Higher than the rent, bro.
That one, like, I was like, oh my gosh, like, it's just paints such a brutal picture of how his home is just destroyed, and it's no longer what he remembers.
Yeah. And I remember you mentioned the idea of his plant being dead, and that's another one of my favorite lines in the whole record. This idea of, oh, I didn't water my plant growing up, and that bleeds into the way that I wasn't disciplined enough to make my dreams happen.
Yeah, for
Mm.
sure.
And all of that together just kind of hit me really hard, where he was just like, oh yeah, my plant's dead, I guess that stream's dead, I guess I'm not a millionaire. Huh. I guess I should have listened to like I guess I should have taken better care of my plant or whatever. And like I should have taken better care of my life. But now I'm home and everything's boring now. So what exactly was I coming back to?
Yeah. It's just
Right.
this whole song is just heart-wrenching detail wall to wall. And then thankfully he has the decency to give us my favorite outro on this album. The one
is
with his
hilarious.
son.
What is life?
What's life?
Magazine.
A
love
magazine. It's
You were
it's just-
supposed to say 7 seconds. Shut up.
It's so funny, and it leads into the next song perfectly, and boy is it much needed after the misery that is the song Home. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yes, Quincy's
Let's
March.
just talk about that outro for a second. I want to talk about this outro for a second. So the outro made me super nostalgic because like there's this book that my dad gave me forever ago. It was a book called Tomfoolery, and it was from like the 50s or something like that. Just ridiculously old book. Has that old style drawing, all that good stuff. But basically it has a bunch of those different kinds of things where it's like, what's life? A magazine, how much does it cost? 7 cents. I only got 6 cents. That's tough. That's tough. What's tough? Life. What's life? A magazine. But it has a bunch of those different ones that just kind of loop. Like the one that stuck in my brain was why is the 4th of July? Because J is the 1st of July, U is the 2nd of July, L is the 3rd of July. Why is the 4th of July?
That's pretty good.
It's pretty good. But like that made me super nostalgic for just kind of sitting down and just kind of reading through that book and being just like absolutely astonished at the wordplay in there.
Yeah.
There's a lot of good stuff. I'll probably find the book later and I'll probably throw some of the stuff up in the Discord. That's a Patreon perk.
Oh.
If you guys wanna sign up for the Patreon, frick yeah. Yeah. The Patreon that I do not have set up yet by the time of recording, but it will be set up by the time this episode comes out. I promise. No, I haven't. I plan on having it set up before the first episode goes out. But yeah, no, like I love that. And then also that was one of the most fire beats on the album, that like instrumental behind that whole outro.
Oh yeah.
I was just like, yo, this is gonna drop into something so fire, and then the next track started and I was like, oh. But like it was enough. It was enough. I was just like, that was really cool.
Yeah. Speaking of the next track,
Quincy's March.
oh boy. I personally find Quincy's March super interesting in that I think of the songs, it balances the tragedy and like happiness very well. And the kind of just start with the instrumental, as you were mentioning. I find immediately the way it uses the sort of like shaker noise, like a baby's toy, to lead
Right.
into that instrumental. To like automatically, I'm like, all right, we're tying these like this is my son. We're gonna talk about my son themes, and
Also the bells. Also the
Oh,
bells
yeah.
later in the track. Like I just picture a kid banging on the xylophone.
100%.
Like yeah.
Like the instrumental
Very much
throughout.
thought put into this instrumental.
Yeah, it just has
So
a lot
good.
of like small details that make you think of like a kid's toy or something, or like little baby noises or whatever.
Little baby noise.
Not the
Or,
rapper
like,
Lil
the baby
Baby.
noises.
Yeah, it's
Let's
little baby
go.
noises. But yeah, I love how refreshing this is. Like how he talks about how Quincy changed his perspective on everything. Like
Yeah.
he even mentions how he inspired him to finish the album. Like there was this bar check where he says, "Changed me while I changed you, gave me what I gave you," which is like, oh, I was changing you while you changed. Anyway, Yeah, but it's very interesting and refreshing to just like how the birth of his son. He mentions how like now life is less meaningless now and stuff like that. So just all of those feelings from before come up are like culminated into this. Oh, my son's born now. I have to focus on someone else besides myself, and you know that all of these elements are gonna be going into this new human being. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I think
Yeah, and I just love how much this flies in the face of everything that a lot of artists stand for. This track where it's like super counterintuitive, right? Where he's just like, you have him 1 second saying, "Oh, my son inspired me to finish the album," but then the next second hear him say, "Yeah, I don't care about being the greatest
yup.
rapper. My greatest achievement is my son." And then you're just like, "Wait, hold up, what?"
Yeah.
You're an artist. You're supposed to care like about your craft above all else. But then he's like, no, like my son is my greatest achievement. It's the thing that gives life any sort of meaning. Like I'm not like this art stuff is cool and all, but like it means nothing compared to that. And I'm just like, dang,
I, l-
that's a vibe check right there.
Probably my favorite line on this whole album is that one. The I don't care about being the best rapper. I just want to be the best
The
dad.
best dad,
I was
yeah.
like,
So
oh
wholesome.
my gosh, so sweet. And then the biggest compliment I could give to Scott on this one is that this song legit makes me think he's a great dad. Like it just like immediately I was like, wow, this guy would be a great dad. Like he just cares so much. And then as for the tragedy, because with this song, with this whole album, there's no way to escape tragedy. It's the most gut wrenching and like heartbreaking line on the whole album, in my opinion, is where he's talking about watching his son's eye open and then watching his wife's eyes close.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, can't.
Was it his Nana or
No, I think that was his. I think Nana is his wife. Is like,
Wow.
yeah.
I didn't even know that.
I
Wow.
think so. I'm not sure. That's
If that is, that's insane.
yeah, because it's just like, can't something go right for this guy? And then the whole song throughout is just like, oh, here's my son. I love him, and like he's the one thing that is right in my life. Also, just real quick, second verse
Marcha?
is my second. No. The second
Oh.
verse of this song is in my opinion, the second best on this album. Possibly even the first, but it's just so like so nice how he talks of his son and just ties everything there back together.
Yeah. I definitely the moment that really hit me hard was when he said that like I see signs of my dad as much as I hate him
Yeah.
Right.
or something along those lines. I think that was the most gut-wrenching moment to me because it's like he's like he cares so much and he wants so much for his son, but he's so scared that he's just going to be exactly like his father and that he's not going to be able to give his son a better upbringing. And like it ends on a positive note with him sort of looking optimistically out towards fatherhood. But like that line is just like he's just like I see I see the kind of things that my dad did in myself and he's just like kicking himself so hard for it.
Yeah. Now,
Yeah.
now for the final track.
Just a vibe, bro.
I
I
mean,
mean,
Break.
if we're gonna end on that somber note, we should just go to the final track like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The only real
Solid free jazz.
Yeah, it's just great jazz, solid instrumental. The only thing I found interesting, because I did a little bit of research on this one. T
Same.
break, as in the letter T break, is a term used for a tolerance break, in which somebody goes off drugs for a bit, so they build up a tolerance. So it's kind of like this nice little, oh, see, I'm off drugs now. I'm getting better. I'm getting better at my life. Also, quick shout out to the end of the song, towards the end of the instrumental, rather, where you get the like the little yeah yeahs in the background.
Yeah.
Oh, the other thing that I also really like about this, the title of the Tea Break track, is you hear him in Quincy's March talking about the fact that his tea is almost ready.
Oh shoot! I
And
never caught that.
Oh, at the end.
yeah, and like I like to think about that as like, okay, like my tea is ready, and then like you have like this long instrumental at the end of Quincy's March, and I like to imagine it is like, okay, like my son is so important to me that I'm going to hop off the rest of this track and spend time with him while I'm drinking tea.
Yep.
Right.
And then you have
Oh, go ahead.
and then you have like the last track that's called Tea Break, which is literally he's just drinking his tea.
Chilling. Yeah, what even adds to that, I did some research, and in an interview, he mentioned even that there were supposed to be lyrics on this, and he took them off.
Wow.
And just for that effect of it being that break. And also, there are some somber elements to just the instrumentation. He actually did it all himself.
No way.
Yeah, it's crazy. He produced it. It's wild. But yeah, there's elements like what was it? His aunt was a breast surgeon or something, and then she got dementia and couldn't move or something. And I don't know if you've heard of that album. I forgot what it was called, but it's like,
I know which one you're talking.
Yeah, the really long one. Yeah, that basically talks about the deterioration of the mind. It's not for the faint of heart. I wouldn't listen to it if you had, yeah. But yeah, he said it was kind of like representing that deterioration of life, even the procession of, it being distorted at the beginning, the dum 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 da da dum dum, it's kind of glitching, and then near the end it's like really slow. And yeah, his wife was crying and everything listening to it. But it's also paralleled with that break with his son. So it's so beautifully done that it has two different meanings and two different endings. So it's very interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah.
Yes, but I loved this album. This was one of the few albums in a while that I've listened to and fallen in love with on first listen. I tend to not really care for a lot of rap because it doesn't really have a good sense of momentum and movement and tempo and like these kind of like larger swelling elements and like these emotional beats instrumentally. And a lot of times I'm not the biggest fan of jazz because it can sometimes feel like it doesn't have a direction. But
right,
the lyrics give the music so much direction and the jazz gives it so much tempo, and so everything just balances out for this just absolutely great experience for me, and that's why I really love this album. Also, some of the most personal lyrics, some of the most like it's just all around a fabulous album. Like I just love this album. Thank you so much for getting me hip to this, bro. Like I would have never found this on my own, and it was just such a treat to listen to.
This album occupies a space in my favorite albums list, where it's just one that I come back to like once a month and just fall in love with again. Everything about it just appeals to me, and I'm so happy to share it with people, even if certain people, Malachi, waited multiple years to finally listen to it. You knew I was gonna bring that up, right?
Yeah, yo, he tried to put me on this when we met. Like literally the month that we met, he put me onto this. I never listened to it. I think I heard Pocket Lint like the first 2 minutes.
It might have been because I played you Pocket Lint before.
Oh yeah,
gosh.
Nevertheless,
yeah, I know that feeling of being like, hey, you should listen to this, and then just they never listen to it, and I'm like, no, I swear this is good music. I swear you should listen to this album, and they're just like, I'm good.
And it's the fact that this is just so under the radar too. Like, I feel like this should be an essential album. Like, especially if you're a jazz rap fan, it should be like top of the list for your music homework. It is one of my favorite albums of all time. It was like one of the first 3 albums I ever got on vinyl because I was like, yeah, I gotta get the vinyl version of this. It's just
Oh, that
I gotta
probably sounds
say-
crispy.
oh 100%.
I gotta say, I like this better than To Pimp a Butterfly.
Wow.
Oh,
Wow.
that's high praise. Oh,
Whew.
woo.
I mean,
Jeez.
To Pimp a Butterfly is an album I more respect than enjoy.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
That's fair.
Like
Okay.
it's like I'm glad that I've listened to it multiple times, and I respect the space that it occupies in the music industry, and I think that it's very good that it exists, and it's a fantastic album. But this album is like, I really enjoyed it. Like, it's an album that I've actually just been like showing people this album and recommending it left and right to people, because like we had one of my boys had like a show, and we were driving over to the show that he was doing, and I was like, yo, have you heard of Avantdale Bowling Club? And he's like, I have not. And I'm
Yes.
like, let me get you hip real quick.
Spread the
Yeah.
word.
And yeah, this is like, I definitely get the vibes of like, this is a super duper underrated album. I mean, like, I also don't listen to a lot of rap, so it's like, I'm not super duper, like, I can't say, oh, this is one of the greatest rap albums of all time, because I'm not hip to the genre, in the same way that Malachi can't say that some random prog album he found is the best prog album of all time. There's no way that he can't say that Metal by Pink Floyd is one of the best prog albums of all time. I had to throw one in there.
Yeah, I was waiting for it. I was waiting for it. I was really expecting it to be a saxophone reference to, what's the track off of Dark Side of the Moon?
Money.
Yeah, no, not Money.
No, it's
Gig in the Sky or whatever.
No, it's Money.
Gig in the
Money
Sky is that
Money has the absolutely scream. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Money is the one that has the super duper screamy saxophone. No, the one part that I was actually tempted to make a genuine Pink Floyd reference was when talking about vocal inflection to make different characters, and the way that Roger Waters did that on the wall.
Yep.
That was the one time I was this close to making a Pink Floyd reference, but I figured
Naturally.
I'm not gonna do it. Like, I'm not gonna do it just for the bit. I wanted it to come up in a super duper genuine way, and I felt like that was a little bit too much of a non sequitur.
Okay.
But here we are,
Yeah,
talking about Pink Floyd references at the end of the podcast, like we
end.
do. We're basically a Pink Floyd podcast at this point.
Oh man, I'm so glad I got to like share this album with more people, because it is, again, one of my favorite albums of all time. Probably top 5 like favorite albums.
Nice.
It just hits me right where it hits me. I'm, like Mal, a huge jazz rap guy. Probably my favorite subgenre of a genre that I love.
Nice combination genre.
Yeah, I don't know why, but they were just like meant for each other in a certain way. But
oh yeah, 100%. I totally agree.
yeah, this is
Only if it's done right, though.
Oh, for sure. Like, and I feel like we've already said why this is done so right here.
Right.
Well, yeah. Do you want to plug anything before you hop off?
Oh snap! Koji's
Shameless plug.
Steakhouse on almost all social media. Koji KO.
We'll plug them in the description.
Oh,
for you
sweet.
guys.
Yeah. Okay, that works.
Yeah.
That's Twitter. That's Instagram. Maybe
follow
YouTube
me
at
on
some
Twitter.
point. We'll see. But that's listen to Mike the Snare. Watch his videos.
Yeah. My pipe dream is to get him on the podcast.
That would be
one day. That's my
amazing.
pipe
Pipe
dream.
dream. His pipe dream. His pipe
No
dream.
boy. Oh boy.
Hey. But
That's
yeah,
kinda
no.
crazy.
This has been a pretty swagalicious episode. I definitely rate this album frick yeah out of 10.
Oh.
What would it set out to do out of 10?
True.
It's
No, like,
Ryan's favorite rating.
Right. No, that's my second favorite. You know, that is my favorite rating.